So we talked about the label property. Remember?
Right. The label property is the topmost, right? For example, gross sales, like, and then there will be a bunch of accounts underneath it with the plus operator.
Gross sales is not a label because gross sales is something which is storing some value, right?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Now it depends if you are calculating that value on the fly. If you're calculating on the fly, it's dynamic calc. If you
Right.
are storing it from the flat file or the source file, then that's store. And then there is label, which is not, which if you have something which you don't want to store, now there's no
I
need of.
confused it with the tilde thing when I was telling you about the gross sales. Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay, yeah. So the gross sales is again something which is a shared member
Mm-hmm.
because you use the gross sales to calculate your net sales,
Mm-hmm.
and then you also use your gross sales to calculate your gross sales percentage. So most of the times it's a shared member.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Now there is never share and then there is ignore. So cap is never share and then the tilde is ignore.
Okay.
Okay, you want to ignore the value. So let's get back to this label. So let's quickly read through it. It says that if you have a member added to your outline and what is the default storage property, that's it is stored. Okay, so when it is stored, it occupies some space on the disk. Basically it occupies some memory on the block.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry. However, members which do not sorry, members to which no data will ever be aggregated or loaded, then you tag them as label, right? Now since the top, I mean the dimensions, whenever you start the first member, the aggregation stops there. I mean the roll up stops there, right? And sometimes you don't need the roll up and the store at the top level. So you mark them as label because you don't really store the data there. Okay. But I mean the topmost parent, most of the times it's label only because you don't store the data. It's a classification basically, the dimension name most of the times. Accounts, it's a dimension name. You don't really store some value which is rolling up to accounts. You may have some children of account as parents where the values roll up and get stored in that member, but not particularly the top of the family. No. Okay. That's why you tag them as label. Um, how can you provide the visibility and maximize the efficiency? Is you don't need the topmost guy to store the data, so that's why you mark them as labeled. Thus, you are you are using the memory efficiently. Okay. Otherwise, you're tagging them as storage. However, you don't need the value stored there at all. So you're wasting memory. Okay, so here it talks about scenario, current year, and budget. Scenario is our label only. Okay. Now, if scenario is our label only, the value current year, let's say for the Q1, is holding 120, and the budget is holding 110, and so far, whatever it is. What happens is there is a property which is called as implied sharing. What it does is it picks the value, okay, it picks the value of the very first children of the dimension, and it stores, I mean, it's calculated, and it doesn't store, but how do I say it? So the first child shares this value with the parent. So let me put it across in that value, in that way. The first child shares the value with the parent. Okay, so this is called as implied sharing. It's very important. Okay, you have to know this concept, implied sharing concept. Now, if you look at this what do you call structure, the value which is shared is the value from the first child. Okay, so how do you optimize? Okay, so let's go and optimize. Sometimes you don't need the value of the first child to be stored. Okay, so how do you control that is what we are going to learn about. Okay, so where were we? Okay, in some dimensions, you may want to create a parent simply to group members together. Unlike scenario, you're just creating that member to group the whole scenario part. What else could you think of in scenario, Ramki? So we talked about, on the scenario current year, and then you also talked about budget. What else could you think of? What else could be the members?
Projection, estimate.
Estimate, yeah. Budget, yes. And what else? Forecast, yes.
Also the most commonly used.
Yeah, and there is adjustment.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, without adjustment, there wouldn't be anything, right? If you're into planning, there has to be an adjustment, because the adjustments are done for all the inputs which are done by the accountants. Okay. This is also a very important thing you need to remember. Okay, so I mean, you don't really need aggregation here, do you? You don't need to consolidate your adjustments and your budget and your, I mean, it doesn't really make sense, does it? No, it doesn't. Mm-hmm. So you have a dimension name. It's just to make sure that you're grouping a few members. Mm-hmm. So you mark it as label. Okay, so label only members do not store data. Yeah. However, when viewed in reports or used in calculations, A label-only member points to the data for its first stored child. Now, in this case, both of them are store members, the members which store values. So a label-only member points to the data for its first stored child. Okay. Now you may not want this sometimes, you know. So how do you do that? Using the ignore. You can use the ignore, and then yeah, the cap, which is never share. So if you mark this current year as never share, it will not share the value to the parent. Understood?
So, but what does that do? It doesn't do anything, right?
No, there are situations where you don't want to have the implied sharing applied.
So so if in this particular example, right, looking at the screenshot, if I do a smart view and then if I pull scenario, right, if I don't put current year or budget, I will see 120 because it's pulling from here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, which you don't want, right? Well, how does it make sense? So that's why you mark it as never share.
I got it. So that way, when you put scenario, you don't want any value. You want to force the user to specify, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so there is one more thing which you need to take care of. Level 0 members cannot be label only.
Mohammed, sorry, just a quick, can you just clarify the difference between level 0 and the first generation?
Okay, so generation is from the top, and levels are from the bottom.
Got it. Okay, got it. Okay.
Yeah, you want me to repeat that again? That's okay, because I think we already spoke about this last week. Generations are basically when you are looking at the outline from the top.
Right.
So
right.
the topmost will be generation 1, and the children under it are generation 2, and children under them would be generation 3. Yeah.
No, got it. Yeah, I think I even said this 2-3 weeks and I forgot, like last week. So I've not been diligent in reading anything.
That's okay, no problem. It's good that you, you ask, and then when you ask more, you remember it forever.
Right.
Auto optimization about the implied sharing. Here it explains you, like I told you. See this? Right. There is ignore, and there is plus, and there is ignore again. And this budget is again a plus operator, which means what value goes in there. We'll explain, he'll explain it here. So what did I tell you? The implied sharing is an automatic internal optimization created by Essbase. Yeah. Okay, what happens when your parent has only one child? It goes for the implied sharing. Right? Okay. And what happens?
Not even an option, they never share.
I'm sorry?
So you're saying if it has only one child, there is no option for never share?
You can mark it as never share, right?
Oh, okay.
Like you have ignore.
Okay.
Yeah, that's explicitly managing the implied sharing.
Gotcha.
You have to mark it as ignore or never share. Okay. Because you have to understand that whenever there is one child under a parent, it does the implied sharing. It works for the consolidation. and it works for all the shared members or the stored members, I should say. Reason being, there's only one child. Whatever is the value in there will be shared with the parent. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but you may not want it. You may not want it sometimes. Okay, that's what you need to remember. So whenever you're creating a parent with just one child, you should, I mean, it should come to your, come to your head saying that, okay, here is the implied sharing is gonna happen. Do I need to control the implied sharing, or do I don't need to? I mean, if I don't need to, I'll leave it like that. Otherwise, you control it. Okay, so that's the point here, because most of the times you tend to forget. Okay. Here it talks about what is implied sharing. The shared member and label only properties define a shared data relationship explicitly. But some members are shared in certain circumstances, even if you do not explicitly set them as shared. Although you don't set that member as shared, it shares the value because of the implied sharing. Make sense? Okay, so unless you want a member to share a value, that's when you want a member to share a value, you mark it as a shared member, right?
Right.
So that's when it will share the value, whatever it has. Agree? Now, what he's trying to say is you don't need to mark it as shared when it's implied sharing. It happens automatically.
Okay.
Yeah, although you're not marking that member as a shared member. I mean, the sharing only happens when you mark a member as a shared member. Otherwise, it's just a store data, right?
So, where would the example of, let's imagine a simple company structure, right? A P&L and a balance sheet. So where would be the cases where you would do the sharing of members, like when you create any alternate hierarchies?
No, the gross sales is a simple example, like I told you. There are lots of situations where you share the values between the members.
I'm sorry. Okay. So the gross sales example, you're referring to the one where you dynamically calc, right? Like I'm thinking of, I'm going to create a parent called gross sales, right? And then I'm going to create like two child accounts, net sales and then discounts, right? Yeah, so in that case, right? So those will aggregate to gross sales. So when I specify gross sales are shared, in my mind I'm thinking maybe some other part of the account tree I have some other alternative like account roll-up where I'm doing gross sales times divided by net income or something like that. In that case only I would need to share anything, right?
That's right. That's right. I mean, in the whole dimension, if you need a value to be shared, I mean, if you are performing some operation where you already have a member, okay, where you don't want to calculate it again, but it has to be in the same dimension, then you can just mark it as share, and then you can use the same member again in the hierarchy.
Exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
In what cases the implied sharing happens? One, a parent has only one child.
Right.
A parent has only one child that consolidates to the parent. In this case also, the implied sharing happens.
Mm-hmm.
If the parent has 3 children, 2 of them are marked to be ignored during consolidation. The parent and the one child that consolidates contain the same data. Agree with me?
Mm-hmm.
That's the same case here. So the draft 2 is shared or basically consolidates to budget.
Right.
Yeah, so this is also called as implied sharing because both of them are ignore. So the one which can store data and consolidate will be stored in the budget. You don't want that, you just add ignore. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we can move forward. You talked about alternate hierarchies, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it talks about the alternate hierarchies using the shade members. Okay, this is the hot topic.
Okay.
Attributes. Very hard to play around with attributes. Okay. Attributes. What do you understand by attributes?
Well, I've seen the use of attribute dimensions in our cube where, for reporting, right? Let's say you need a mandatory number of dimensions, say 7. But then you can also add this attribute dimension as the 8. So even if you don't add this dimension, you'll still get the value. So it's basically like giving, putting an additional tag on a member or something like that, right?
Well, why would you do that?
If I have to write some scripts, right? So let's say there are a bunch of asset accounts that I want to incorporate in my calculations or something like a specific calculation. So if I put a attribute to those, right, and I can, in my query or something, I'm not done anything like that. I'm just assuming.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I'm not looking for a perfect answer. I'm just trying to understand what do you understand by attributes. That's all. So
I'm just saying this based on my knowledge of HFM.
Yeah.
In which
Cool.
So we used to have the UD1s and UD2s. So in the rules, I used to reference those, certain, some accounts as UD1. I would call them ASTK, whatever, and then, in my rules file, I would reference it. Use my to call them.
Okay, so that's okay. So no, you do not just have these attribute dimensions for the heck of it. Okay. There is no need if your business doesn't want the granular reporting. The reporting at the micro level. When I say micro level, let's pick an example of Coke or Pepsi or whatever.
Okay.
It comes in different flavors, and then it comes in different sizes. Again, it comes in different, it could be can, it could be bottle. Okay, it could be red, it could be green, it could be black. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if you want a report to understand how many cans of 200 ml Pepsi or 500 ml Pepsi did I sell or the sales. So the reporting can be done until that level. Now, if you understand this, where is your product listed? When you list your product, So it's basically on the top, it's product, and then you will have its products like Pepsi, and then whatever the other products are. Okay, under Pepsi, you will have uh, whatever flavors. Okay, and
Right.
then you will also have what 200 ml. I mean the sizes. Okay, when you're marking a product, you will have Pepsi 200 ml, Pepsi 500 ml. Now, under Pepsi 200 ml, can you have can bottle? And again, under Pepsi 500 ml can bottle.
Yeah, it'll be
You know,
redundant.
yeah. So here there is a lots of repetition, right? So what you do is you create an attribute dimension. An attribute dimension does not occupy any space on your queue. And then you will create a few members under your attribute dimension, like, what did I say? Can, bottle, yeah, and whatever the granularity you want.
Right.
And you will tag these members to the members out there in your dimension, which is product dimension, right? Now,
Right.
there are a few conditions. When your one attribute dimension can only be used with one custom dimension, basically. You cannot use the can, bottle members under this attribute dimension with any other dimension. If
Right,
you have used it with product, that's the end of it. You cannot reuse these members. That's the limitation. Okay,
Right.
so that's the idea. What is an attribute? When you classify information into dimensions, you may find that some metadata can be considered a property or attribute of other metadata. Like can is a property of a metadata which is named as Pepsi 200 ml. Agree?
Right.
Can is a metadata for Pepsi 500 ml. Can is a metadata, or bottle is a metadata for Pepsi 1 liter. So you may find that some metadata can be considered as a property of other metadata. That's why you use this attributes, and definitely for the granular reporting. Okay. So Essbase provides two types of attributes that you can use in your database design. One is UDA, user defined attribute, and other one is attribute dimensions. Now we'll go to UDAs later. Let's understand attribute dimensions first. Let me grab a glass of water. Give me 30 seconds.
Me too.
Okay, so the attribute dimensions, like I said, are the characteristics of another dimension that are defined in a standalone dimension. Can you have an attribute dimension in the same dimension or in an existing dimension? No, it has to be a standalone dimension. Although it's a dimension, it's not a part of your storage in the cube. They don't occupy any space. Okay. When an attribute dimension is associated with a standard dimension or a custom dimension, the standard dimension is the base dimension for the attribute dimension. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so and the attribute members are assigned to the members of the standard dimension. Okay, agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. For example, to track product colors, you can create an attribute dimension called color with the members, whatever the colors. Okay. Product can be the base dimension to the color attribute dimension. Like I said, most of the times it's product. That's the only way you want your reporting to be at the micro level, right? What else could be? No, it doesn't make sense. You have, okay, you have your region sometimes, but do you have anything which you want to tag a region like? No. So you don't really use the attribute dimensions for any other dimension than product.
Right.
Okay. Most of the times, I never came across any other situation where the attribute dimension was used against any other standard dimension. Okay. Okay. So the attribute dimensions provide powerful calculation and analytic advantages that UDAs do not, but also have the following restrictions. So what are the restrictions? In the block storage dimensions or the databases, it can only be associated with sparse standard dimensions. This is very important. Now, when you are creating an attribute dimension, it can only be related with sparse dimensions. They cannot be related with the dense dimensions in PSOs. Okay, remember this. This is very important. And one attribute dimension, like I said, it can be associated with only one base dimension. You cannot share the members in an attribute dimension with any other dimension. Okay?
Yep.
There's one more thing. The attribute members have a one-to-one relationship with the members of the base. How is it one-to-one? If I mark a member, how do I explain? Okay, let me get it. When I say one-to-one, okay. How do I explain this to you? What I'm trying to explain you is, if you are using can, okay, you are using it with only one member at a time. Okay, that's one-to-one basically. You cannot use this can with multiple, what do you call, multiple members in the base dimension. That's what it means. Okay, so so what I'm trying to say is, I cannot just have two members like can and bottle under the attribute as whatever name you want to name it as container. So let's say you built a container as a dimension and it's a attribute dimension. Okay, under containers you have can and you have bottle. Okay, so I cannot use this can. If I use this can with, let's say there is Pepsi 200 ml, yeah, on the product dimension. Are you following me? And then there is Pepsi 500 ml. Okay.
Yep.
Now, if I'm using the can member with Pepsi 200 ml, I cannot use the can member again with Pepsi 500 ml. The Pepsi 500 ml has to be bottle, and the Pepsi 200 ml cannot be a bottle because it's can already. Okay. So what you have to do instead is you will have to create members like Pepsi under container, can 200 ml, bottle 200 ml, can 500 ml, bottle 500 ml, and then you mark 1 to 1, no one to many.
Right.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. So let's say you have 5 variants in product using the capacity. Okay. So let's say 100 ml, 200 ml, 500 ml, liter, 1 liter, and then 2 liters, and then 5 liters. Let's say this is the pattern in your product hierarchy, in your product dimension. So how many attribute members you may need? If they all are in cans and bottles.
10.
Beautiful. There you go. That's how it is. That's how you design your attribute dimension.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that's about the attribute dimensions, and then you'll go to UDAs. Okay.
Yep.
Now, what are UDAs, and what's the flexibility of an UDA over the attribute dimensions? Remember one-to-one in attributes, UDAs, it's one-to-many. You can use one particular UDA between different members, under the same hierarchy bar. Okay.
But logically, it wouldn't make sense, right, to use a UDA for that you define for one member for another member, right? I haven't seen for example, in our company, right, we have a we have a product dimension, right, and then I think we put some UDAs on it, saying where it's sourced from. So it could be a Pfizer sourced, so we call it Pfizer underscore source, Wyeth underscore source, Eli Lilly underscore source, right? So this UDA, it applies only to the product dimension, right? So I don't see it, being used for any other dimension. So does it in reality, practically, do UDAs span many dimensions?
There are chances. I have seen UDAs in different dimensions. There are chances. That's the beauty of UDA.
Okay.
You don't have to create multiple attribute dimensions, and then you can use the same UDA across the whole outline.
Okay.
Okay, in number of times. And believe me, it comes very handy.
Okay.
very handy. I mean, I prefer UDAs over attribute dimensions.
Okay.
Easy, and then you don't have any one-to-one pairing restrictions, you know. And I mean, there are situations where you get, I mean, um, especially when you are having a few calculations done uh, with these attribute members. Okay, there are a few functions which are average attribute, sum attribute. There are a few dimensions which attribute, sum attribute, average, which are used for these kind of calculations. And believe me, they are very tricky. They're not easy to be executed. And most of the times you don't get the correct values. There's a lot of headache behind that. So I personally avoid this. I use UDAs. They work very well. They're flexible, multi-purpose tags that you can assign to any member in the database, any member, regardless of dimension, and regardless of levels, and regardless of anything. You can just tag it. You can create UDAs in a member properties dialog box or load them to members using files. Yeah, black, green, red. Here you're repeating it, right? Black, green for product A. Again, you're repeating black, green under the product B. So on and so forth. Okay?
But why should I do this? I thought so here, right here, right? So I thought I just have to define it once. Why do I have to specify the UDAs for each product?
Why not? You're okay. So your Pepsi 200 ml, it comes in can and bottle, right? So this makes sense. Can and bottle. Yeah.
Okay.
And then 500 ml, can and bottle.
Yeah, but I already defined can and bottle once, right? But why do we have to say it for each?
Where did you define it? You defined it for 200 ml. You didn't define it for. You didn't define it for 500 ml. Now, if there is 1 liter and it's only bottle, so you just decide it as bottle. And you're using the same UDA, bottle and can. You're not using attributes like 200 ml can, 500 ml bottle, 200 ml bottle, 500 ml can. You know what I mean? Different attributes.
Yeah, I get it now. Yeah, I'm just relating it to my SBase application, and you're right. For each of those MPGs, right, the major product groups, we assign one UDA, like Pfizer source or Wyatt source or something like that. So
sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's both, and it works really well. If you want to just look at this reporting for product A, which is green, for product B, which is just green, how easy is it? Right. So it plays a beautiful role. Any product, any member can be assigned any number of UDAs. That's the flexibility, one to many. Okay, what is it talking about now? Business views. I think we'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll finish this tomorrow. It also talks about secondary hierarchies. So tomorrow we'll finish this chapter number 5. And then chapter 6. What's tomorrow? Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We have 3 days, right?
Right.
So, yeah, we'll try to finish another 2 chapters in 3 days, which is chapter 6. Takes us to chapter 6. What else? Let me get here. Okay, chapter 6. Chapter 7 is very important as well. Chapter 8 will be next week. Now, once we are done with chapter 8, we can directly go to, we can directly go to the practical part. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep, very good.
And then we will have the SG2, Student Guide 2 open, and then we'll work on the case study.
Okay.
So you gotta bear with me for a couple of more classes until we get there.
Sure.
And I sincerely apologize for yesterday. Couldn't make it.
Okay. No
I should
problem.
have informed in advance. I mean, I was out of station for the whole week and didn't bother to even look at the emails.
Okay.
So that's my mistake. So
no problem.
all right.
So you getting ready for your next class?
I have another 30 minutes. So I don't really like back-to-back sessions.
Right.
So I'll have another 35 minutes, and then I'll go back to the next class.
Got it. That sounds good.
Yep. What else? Any questions for me?
No, I think we're good. I think so far so good.
It has to be this. This is the base, Ramki. If you get this correctly, everything falls into place. Now you get to understand what are the cases you may use attribute dimensions, what are the cases, how easy it is to use UDA. I mean, it's just that you have the business understanding, and then you say that, okay, if I'm using the attribute dimension, I could only be able to use them against one standard dimension. And if you find that you don't need, I mean, there is more to use, to tag them. There are more standard dimensions where you need to tag them. Then you probably go for UDA. And then you also need to understand how the implied sharing works. Implied sharing is the value which is, it takes the value from the very first child. Now, but it also changes when you have ignore against the first child and the last child. Let's say you have ignore against first child and the last child, and then you have a consolidation operator for the second child. According to the implied sharing, it should pick the value from the first child. However, you marked it as ignored, so it will pick the second child's value. I mean, the value of the second child will be shared to the parent. So that's implied sharing, which you need to be aware of. You don't usually skip the values. It's very rare. However, you need to be aware of that.
Right.
And we also talked about some situation I don't remember of, but it was very important. Well, and then there is a shared member. Shared member, you have to remember that it has to be under the same dimension. You cannot use some member in another dimension. You cannot do that. I also wanted to talk about something which we discussed, which was very, there was some sort of, can't remember. I mean, it just got off my head. I just had it on my mind and it left. Okay, do UDAs occupy any space on the database?
No.
No. Do attributes? No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought attribute dimensions were like, since there was a separate dimension, I thought they occupied space.
No, they don't. They're just like this, okay? It's about the metadata most. I mean, it's, how do I explain it? It's just for the reporting. It's completely for the reporting, and it doesn't occupy any space.
Right.
What else can I think of? There was something which I wanted to reiterate or iterate. Yeah, this is also important, variance. What else? Yeah, this one. TB first, TB last, and TB average. Very important, especially when you're doing the inventory. Mostly it falls under inventory.
Yep.
Yep, and then there is also something dynamic calc and store. Remember? There are dynamic calcs and dynamic calc and store. Do you remember the difference?
Yeah. Dynamic calc, it's not stored, so it'll occupy lesser space, but the time consolidation time might,
Right. I mean, it's only when you do the calculation. The calculation is done on the fly, and it doesn't occupy any space. That's dynamic calc. The dynamic calc and store, for the first time, it calculates and then stores the value.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's there, and then the YTDs and the QTDs, the time series. You just go through them. It's very important. Before we get ahead to the case study, I think you should be good with all these topics.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, sounds good, Mohammed.
Alrighty, so I will let you go now. We'll catch up tomorrow.
Sure. Have a good day.
And you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.